The three ships appeared without warning. They were massive, each one larger than any space station humanity had ever built. They hung in the darkness near Earth's moon like sleeping giants, their hulls covered in symbols that no human could read. Ambassador. Unipark stood at the observation window of the orbital station and watched them. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a calm face. Nothing about her showed fear, even though her heart was beating fast. Behind her, the communication officer spoke in a shaking voice. Ambassador, they are sending a message. Audio only. Play it, Una said. The voice that filled the room was deep and cold. It spoke in perfect Korean, then English, then Mandarin, as if it knew exactly who was listening. People of Earth, you have been noticed by the Galactic Council. You will send representatives to the Council homeworld of Nethera Prime within 30 standard cycles. This is not a request. This is a summons. Failure to appear will be considered an act of war against 847 member species. We await your compliance. The message ended. The room was silent. Una turned to face her staff. Their faces were pale. Some of them looked ready to cry. She understood their fear. For 300 years, humanity had wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they had their answer, and it was terrifying. Contact Earth, she said quietly. Tell them we need an emergency session of the United Assembly. Tell them to wake everyone up. 3 days later, the Great Hall of the United Earth Assembly was full. Leaders from every nation sat in their seats, their faces serious. On the large screen behind the main stage, images of the alien ships played on repeat. Admiral Tai-Ho Kong stood at the center of the room, his uniform decorated with medals from 30 years of service. He was an old man now, but his voice was still strong. We have been studying these vessels since they arrived, he said. Their technology is far beyond ours. Their weapons could destroy our entire fleet in minutes, but that is not what worries me the most. He pressed a button, and the screen changed. It showed a list of names, hundreds of them, written in alien symbols with translations beneath. These are the species that have joined the Galactic Council over the past 10,000 years. We managed to intercept and translate some of their records. 212 of these species did not join by choice. They were conquered, absorbed. Their cultures were erased. Their people became workers and soldiers for the Council. The room erupted in angry voices. Admiral Tai-Ho raised his hand for silence. There's more. Dr. Hannah Yoon, our chief language expert, has translated the terms they will offer us. Dr. Hannah Yoon was young, barely 30 years old, but she was the best in her field. She stepped forward and spoke clearly. The standard terms for new species are as follows. First, we must give up 40% of our territory, including the Proxima Centauri colony. Second, we must allow council inspectors to examine and control our military. Third, we must provide 2 million citizens each year as workers for something called the labor corps. In exchange, we receive protection and the right to trade with council species. Protection from whom? Someone shouted from the crowd. From the council itself, Hannah answered. That is how they operate. They offer protection from a threat that they create. If we refuse, we become the enemy. The assembly hall fell into chaos. People argued and shouted. Some demanded immediate surrender. Others called for war. Ambassador Una Park sat quietly in her chair and listened to all of it. When the noise finally died down, she stood up. I have a question for Admiral Tai-Ho, she said. If we fight, can we win? The old admiral looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled, just slightly. I have spent the last century preparing for this day, he said. We have hidden our true strength. Our public fleet is small, yes, but in the outer colonies, we have built something else. 4,000 warships, Ambassador, armed with weapons they have never seen. Crewed by soldiers who have trained their whole lives for this moment. The room went completely silent. We cannot defeat the entire council, Tai-Ho continued, but we do not need to. We only need to make them afraid. We only need to show them that conquering humanity will cost them more than we are worth. Una nodded slowly. She looked around the room at the faces of Earth's leaders. She saw fear, Yes. But she also saw something else. Pride. Anger. The stubborn refusal to kneel. "Then I propose we vote," she said. "We will go to Nathara Prime. We will hear their terms. And then we will decline. Every single one." The vote was unanimous. 1 week later, the diplomatic vessel Dawn lifted off from Earth's surface. Captain Minho Seo sat at the controls, guiding the ship through the atmosphere and into the cold darkness of space. Behind them, the massive flagship Hansen followed, its weapons hidden but ready. Commander Ginho Beek stood on the bridge of the Hansen, watching the alien escort ships on his sensors. They were large and impressive, but something about them seemed wrong. Their movements were slow. Their formations were sloppy. These were not warriors. These were messengers. "They are confused," he said to Admiral Taiho, who stood beside him. "They expected us to come alone and afraid. They do not understand why we brought warships." Taiho nodded. "Good. Let them wonder. Let them worry. By the time they understand what we are, it will be too late." Far away on the megastructure called Nathara Prime, High Arbiter Velion received word that the humans were coming. His advisor, Envoy Dreza, expressed concern about the armed escort. Velion waved his hand dismissively. "Every new species makes noise at first," he said. "They shout and threaten and beat their chests. But in the end, they all bend. They all kneel. The humans will be no different." He turned back to his window and looked out at the stars, confident in his power. Blind to the storm that was coming, he could not have been more wrong. Nathara Prime was not a planet. It was a machine, a structure built by ancient hands, floating in the darkness between stars. It was the size of a small moon. It's covered in towers and domes and landing platforms that stretched toward the sky like metal fingers. Millions of beings lived there, representatives of species from every corner of the galaxy. Captain Minho Seo guided the Dawn through the orbital traffic, his eyes wide with wonder. Around them, thousands of ships moved in careful patterns, each one stranger than the last. Some were shaped like spheres. Others looked like living creatures, with wings and scales and glowing eyes. The sheer variety was overwhelming. "There must be hundreds of different species here," he whispered. Dr. Hannah Yoon sat behind him, studying the data on her screen. Her face was troubled. "Look at them more closely," she said. "Look at the smaller ships. The ones without weapons." Minho looked. She was right. The smaller vessels were different. Their hulls were worn and dirty. Their movements were slow and tired. They did not fly like proud representatives of great civilizations. They flew like servants, like slaves. "These are the integrated species," Hannah said quietly. "The ones who were conquered? The ones who said yes?" The Dawn landed on a platform near the center of the megastructure. Ambassador Una Park stepped out first, followed by her delegation. The air was thin and cold, filled with strange smells. Alien guards stood at attention, their faces hidden behind masks. They did not speak. They simply pointed toward a massive doorway. The Hall of Supplicants was a corridor that stretched for nearly a kilometer. Its walls were covered with names, carved into the metal in hundreds of different languages. Each name represented a species that had joined the council. Some were ancient, some were new. All of them had bent the knee. Commander Ginho Beek walked beside Yuna, his hand resting on the weapon at his hip. He noticed something strange about the other delegates they passed. They walked with their heads down. Their shoulders were bent. They did not look at the humans. "They are afraid," he said to Yuna. She replied, "They are broken. There is a difference." Yuna walked with her head high. She did not bow. She did not hurry. Every alien they passed stopped to stare at her. They had never seen anything like it. A new species that walked like they owned the galaxy. The Grand Chamber was enormous. It could hold 50,000 delegates, and today it was full. Representatives from hundreds of species sat in rising tiers that circled a central stage. The ceiling was so high that clouds formed near the top. Drifting slowly in the artificial atmosphere, High Arbiter Velion stood at the center of the stage. He was tall and thin, with gray skin and eyes that glowed with soft blue light. His robes were white, decorated with golden symbols of authority. Behind him, the other council leaders sat in positions of honor. "Welcome, people of Earth," Velion said. His voice echoed through the chamber, translated instantly into every language. "You have traveled far. We are pleased that you have answered our summons." Una did not respond. She simply walked to the small platform reserved for new species and stood there, waiting. Velion continued. "For 60,000 years, the Galactic Council has maintained peace and order in this galaxy. We have welcomed new species into our family. We have protected them from danger. We have given them purpose. Today we offer the same gift to humanity." He gestured, and a holographic display appeared in the air. It showed star maps, resource charts, and long lists of requirements. "The terms are simple," Velion said. "You will cede the star systems known as Proxima Centauri and Tau Ceti to Council administration. Your military vessels will be inspected and registered. Each year you will provide 2 million citizens to serve in the labor corps, where they will contribute to the greater good of all species. In exchange, you will receive our protection, access to our markets, and a seat in this chamber." He smiled, a thin and cold expression. "These terms are generous. They are the same terms offered to every species that came before you. All of them accepted. All of them prospered." The chamber was silent. 50,000 delegates watched the small group of humans, waiting for the words they had heard so many times before. "Yes, we accept. We submit." Ambassador Unipark stood slowly. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of as many delegates as she could. Then she looked directly at High Arbiter Velion. "Thank you for your offer," she said. Her voice was calm and clear. "On behalf of United Earth and her 12 colonies, we decline." Did not explain. She did not bargain. She did not apologize. She simply sat back down. The silence that followed was unlike anything the chamber had ever known. For 3,000 years, no species had refused. The word decline did not exist in this context. Envoy Dress's translation device flickered and sparked. Unable to process what it had heard, High Arbiter Velion stared at Una. His glowing eyes flickered with confusion. "Perhaps there has been a misunderstanding," he said slowly. "Perhaps your translator malfunctioned. We are offering you membership in the greatest alliance in galactic history. You cannot decline." Una stood again. "There is no misunderstanding," she said. "We understood your terms perfectly. We reject them. All of them. Earth will not surrender territory. Earth will not submit to inspections. Earth will not sell its people into labor. We came here to deliver this message personally, as a matter of respect. Our answer is no." She sat down again. The chamber exploded. Delegates shouted in 100 languages. Some demanded immediate punishment. Others simply stared in disbelief. High Arbiter Velion raised his hands for silence, but it took nearly 10 minutes for the noise to fade. "You understand what this means?" Velion said. His voice had lost its warmth. "Refusal is an act of war. You will face the combined might of 847 species. Your worlds will burn. Your people will be scattered. Your name will be forgotten." Una smiled slightly. It was not a friendly smile. "Perhaps," she said, "but we will not kneel." In the highest tier of the chamber, Observer Neith watched everything with ancient eyes. Her species, the Solari, had existed before the Council was born. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had watched as species were crushed for daring to resist, but they had never seen this. They had never seen a species so new, so small, stand before the Council and simply say no. Neith pressed a button on her chair, activating a secure transmission to her homeworld. "The humans have refused," she said. "Prepare everything. The galaxy is about to change." The news spread like fire through dry grass. Within hours, every corner of Nethera Prime knew what had happened. The humans had said no. The humans had refused. The humans had looked at the Council and told them they were not afraid. In the lower levels of the megastructure, where the integrated species lived and worked, whispers began to grow. Old beings who had not smiled in decades felt something strange in their chests. Hope it was a dangerous feeling, one they had forgotten long ago. But the humans had brought it back. Warlord Gorath of the Threll Dominion did not share this hope. He was a massive creature, covered in thick scales and scars from 100 battles. His species had been warriors once before the council broke them. Now they served as enforcers, crushing any species that stepped out of line. He stormed into High Arbiter Velion's private chamber, his heavy feet shaking the floor. "You must destroy them immediately," Gorath growled. "Send the full fleet. Burn their worlds. Make an example of them." Velion sat calmly in his chair, studying a holographic display. "The council does not act in haste," he said. "We will give them time to reconsider. They are new to the galaxy. They do not understand what they have done." "They understand perfectly," Gorath snapped. "That is what frightens me. They are not stupid. They are not crazy. They came here with warships, Arbiter. They expected this. They planned for it." Velion waved his hand dismissively. "A few warships mean nothing against our numbers. They will see reason." In her quarters on Nethera Prime, Dr. Hannah Yoon worked through the night. She had connected her equipment to the station's communication network, listening to thousands of transmissions. Most were encrypted, but Hannah was very good at her job. As the hours passed, she began to see a pattern. The council talked about military strength constantly. They discussed fleet positions and weapon stockpiles and strategic advantages. But something was missing. She called Ambassador Yuna and Commander Jin Ho to her room. Her face was pale, but her eyes were bright with excitement. "I found something," she said. "Something important. The council has not fought a real war in over 8,000 years. Jin Ho frowned. "That is impossible. They have conquered hundreds of species." "No," Hannah said. "They have threatened hundreds of species. There's a difference. Every time a new species appeared, the council showed up with overwhelming numbers. They made demands. They displayed their power. And every time the new species surrendered without fighting," she pulled up her data on the screen. "Look at their military records. Their weapons have not been fired in combat for millennia. Their soldiers have never seen real battle. Their tactics are 8,000 years old. Their entire military is designed for intimidation, not war." Yuna leaned forward, studying the information. "You are saying they are weak." "I am saying they are untested," Hannah replied. "They have power, yes, but they have never had to use it. They do not know what a real enemy looks like. They have never faced a species that would rather die than submit." Yuna was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled. "Send this information to Admiral Taiho," she said. "Tell him to begin moving the fleet." Far from Nethera Prime, in the cold darkness of the outer colonies, Admiral Taiho Kong received the message. He stood on the bridge of the Hansen, surrounded by officers who had trained their entire lives for this moment. "All ships," he said into the communication system. "This is Admiral Kong. Begin Operation Dawn. I repeat, begin Operation Dawn." Across 12 star systems, 4,000 warships came to life. Their engines roared, their weapons charged. For 100 years, they had waited in hiding, preparing for the day when humanity would need them. That day had finally arrived. The fleet moved as one, jumping through space toward Nethera Prime. It would take time to arrive, but when they did, the galaxy would never be the same. On Nethera Prime, High Arbiter Velion summoned Ambassador Yuna for a private meeting. His chamber was beautiful, filled with art and treasures from 1,000 conquered worlds. But Yuna did not look at any of it. She looked only at Velion. "I will speak plainly," Velion said. His voice was cold now, stripped of all pretense. "Your refusal has created a problem for me. The other species are watching. If you are allowed to defy the council without consequences, others will try the same. I cannot permit this." "Then what do you propose?" Yuna asked. "Accept the terms," Velion said. "Publicly, before the full council, we will reduce some of the requirements, make it look like you negotiated a better deal. You will save face. Your people will survive. Everyone wins." Yuna shook her head slowly. "You still do not understand. We did not refuse because we thought we could get a better deal. We refuse because your terms are slavery dressed in pretty words. We would rather die than accept them." Velion's eyes flashed with anger. "Then you will die. All of you. Your children. Your grandchildren. Your entire species will be erased from history." Una stood up. "Perhaps. But we will not be the only ones." She walked to the door, then stopped and looked back. "Your council has ruled through fear for 60,000 years. You have never faced a species that was not afraid. You do not know what to do with us? And that terrifies you more than any weapon ever could." She left without another word. 3 days later, Ambassador Una requested an audience with the full council once again. 50,000 delegates gathered in the Grand Chamber, expecting an apology, a surrender, a desperate plea for mercy. Instead, Una stood before them with a smile on her face. 3 days ago, I delivered humanity's refusal of your terms," she said. "Today, I am here to deliver our terms to you." The chamber erupted in confused noise. Terms? The new species was offering terms to the council? It was absurd. It was insane. Una raised her hand, and the noise slowly died. "First, you will dissolve the labor corps immediately and free all conscripted workers. Second, you will end the tribute system that forces member species to surrender resources and territory. Third, you will recognize the right of any species to leave the council peacefully. You have 30 cycles to comply." High Arbiter Velion stood up, his face twisted with rage. "You dare? You tiny, insignificant creatures dare to make demands of us? With what army? With what power?" As if in answer, the chamber's sensors began to scream. Warning lights flashed across every display. Delegates looked at their screens and went pale. Thousands of ships were entering the system. Human ships. Warships. Warlord Goroth stared at his tactical display, watching the fleet approach. His hands began to shake. 4,000 vessels, he whispered. Where did they come from? How is this possible? On the central stage, Ambassador Unipark smiled. "You asked with what army," she said. "There is your answer. The clock starts now." The human fleet spread across the darkness like a steel curtain. 4,000 ships, each one bristling with weapons that the galaxy had never seen. They did not attack. They did not threaten. They simply existed, a wall of metal and fire that could not be ignored. Admiral Tai Ho Kong stood on the bridge of the Hanson, watching the sensor displays. Around him, his officers worked in calm silence. They had trained for this moment for decades. They were ready. "Let's open a channel to Nethera Prime," Tai Ho said. "Broadcast to all frequencies." The communication officer nodded. "Channel open, Admiral." Tai Ho spoke clearly, his voice carrying across the void to every ship, every station, every corner of the megastructure. "This is Admiral Tai Ho Kong of the United Earth Defense Fleet. We have not come here to conquer. We have not come here to destroy. We have come here to refuse. Humanity will not be enslaved. Humanity will not be broken. If you force us to fight, we will fight. But we would prefer peace. The choice is yours." He cut the transmission and turned to Commander Ginho Beak. "Now we wait," he said. On Nethera Prime, the council descended into chaos. Delegates screamed at each other in 100 languages. Some demanded immediate surrender. Others called for war. High Arbiter Villion tried to maintain order, but his authority was crumbling by the minute. The integrated species were the first to break. The Malvic delegation, a proud people who had been conquered 3,000 years ago, stood up and walked out of the chamber. They did not ask permission. They did not bow. They simply left. Within hours, 3 more delegations followed. Then 10, then 20. Systems that had been loyal for millennia began broadcasting declarations of independence. The labor corps, filled with workers who had been taken from their homes, started refusing orders. The council's power had always been built on fear. Now that fear was fading, replaced by something far more dangerous. Hope. Warlord Goroth could not accept what was happening. His entire life had been dedicated to the council's strength. He had crushed rebellions. He had burned worlds. He would not let a species of soft, weak mammals destroy everything he had built. "I will end this myself," he growled. He gathered his personal fleet, 200 warships crewed by the last true Thrall warriors. They launched from Nethera Prime and burned toward the human formation at maximum speed, on the Hansen. Commander Ginho watched them approach. "Incoming hostile vessels," he reported. 200 ships. Thrall design. They are charging weapons. Admiral Taiho did not look worried. "Show them what human weapons can do." The battle lasted 11 minutes. The Thrall ships were large and impressive, built in an age when size meant power, but they were slow. Their weapons were outdated. Their tactics were predictable. Human railguns fired first. Massive projectiles, accelerated to incredible speeds, tore through Thrall shields like paper. Missiles followed, guided by targeting systems that could track a single bolt in a storm. Laser batteries carved through hulls with surgical precision. Gorath watched his fleet die around him. Ships that had served the Council for centuries exploded in seconds. Warriors who had never known defeat screamed as their vessels came apart. In 11 minutes, everything he had was gone. His flagship drifted alone, surrounded by debris. The human fleet could have destroyed him easily. Instead, they simply stopped firing. A message came through on his communication system. "This is Admiral Taiho Kong. You are defeated. Surrender your vessel, and you will be treated with honor. Resist, and you will join your fleet. Choose." Korthoth sat in the darkness of his broken bridge, staring at nothing. His scales were cracked. His blood dripped onto the floor. He had never lost before. He did not know how to process it. Slowly, he reached for the communication panel. "I surrender," he whispered. Captain Minho Seo watched the battle from the observation deck of the Dawn. He sat in a comfortable chair, cup of tea in his hands. He did not even need to leave his shuttle. 11 minutes, he said to no one in particular. They really were that weak. On Nethera Prime, High Arbiter Velion watched the destruction of the Thrall fleet through a window in his chamber. His hands were shaking. His face was pale. Everything he believed about the universe was falling apart. There was a knock at his door. He did not answer, but it opened anyway. Ambassador Yuna Park stepped inside, alone and unarmed. "May I sit?" she asked. Velion gestured weakly to a chair. He did not have the strength to refuse. Yuna sat down and looked at him with something that might have been pity. "You wanted to know why we refused?" she said. "I will tell you now." Velion said nothing. He just listened. "When your message reached Earth, we were afraid. Of course we were afraid. You have ruled this galaxy for 60,000 years. Your technology is beyond anything we had ever imagined. By every measure, we should have surrendered." She paused, looking out at the stars. "But then we read your terms. We saw what you were really offering: territory, labor, control. You dressed it up in pretty words, but the truth was clear. You wanted to own us. You wanted to turn our children into workers and our soldiers into servants. You wanted to erase everything that makes us human." Ow. Her voice grew harder, and we decided that we would rather die than let that happen. We looked at your power and your numbers and your ancient empire, and we said no. Not because we thought we could win, but because some things are worth dying for. Freedom is worth dying for. Dignity is worth dying for. The right to choose our own future is worth dying for. She stood up and walked to the window. Standing beside him, "Your council has survived for so long because every species you encountered made a rational choice. They calculated the odds, saw that resistance was hopeless, and surrendered. It was the logical thing to do." She turned to face him. "But humans are not always logical. Sometimes we do things that make no sense. Sometimes we fight battles we cannot win. Sometimes we burn our own ships so we cannot retreat. It is our greatest weakness. It is also our greatest strength." Velion finally found his voice. It was weak and broken. "What happens now?" Yuna smiled softly. "Now the council votes. They accept our terms, or they reject them. If they reject them, we will fight. We will probably lose. But we will make it cost you so much that your empire will never recover. Or you can accept, and we can build something new together. Something better than what came before. She walked toward the door. The choice is yours, Arbiter. It always was. The vote took less than an hour. The council accepted humanity's terms. The labor corps was dissolved. The tribute system ended. Species that wished to leave were free to go as the results were announced. Commander Jinho Beek stood on the bridge of the Hansen and watched the celebrations begin on Nathara. Prime, lights were flickering. Music was playing. Beings who had not known joy in centuries were dancing in the streets. Admiral, he said quietly, what happens now? Admiral Taeho Kong looked out at the stars, at the fleet that had changed history, at the galaxy that was waking up from a long nightmare. Now we go home, he said, and we let them figure out what freedom looks like. 1 year had passed since the day humanity refused to kneel. The galaxy was not the same. It would never be the same again. The Galactic Council still existed, but it was a different thing now. The Iron Fist had been replaced by an open hand. 200 species had left in the first 6 months, returning to their homeworlds to rebuild cultures that had been dormant for millennia. Trade continued, but it was fair trade now between equals. The labor corps was gone, its workers sent home with apologies that could never truly heal the wounds of centuries. Earth had changed too. The planet that had once been a small, unknown world in a forgotten corner of the galaxy was now famous. Ships from 100 species visited every day. Some came to trade, some came to learn. Some simply came to see the beings who had looked at an empire and said no. Admiral Taeho Kong had retired from active service. He spent his days in a small house by the sea, watching the waves and remembering friends who had not lived to see this moment. Sometimes young officers came to visit him asking for advice. He always told them the same thing. Be brave, be honest, and never stop fighting for what matters. On a warm spring morning, an unusual ship landed near his house. It was ancient, far older than the council itself. Its hull was covered in patterns. That seemed to shift and move when he looked at them directly. Observer Neith stepped out of the vessel. She was small and thin, with skin like polished silver and eyes that held the weight of countless years. She walked slowly toward Taeho, her movements careful and deliberate. Admiral Kang, she said. Her voice was soft, like wind through leaves. I have traveled a long way to speak with you. Taeho bowed his head respectfully. Observer Neith, I remember you from the council chamber. You were watching us. I'm always watching, Neith replied. My people, the Solari, have existed since before the council was born. We have seen civilizations rise and fall. We have watched as empires stretched across the stars, then crumbled to dust. We thought we had seen everything. She sat down on a rock near the shore, looking out at the endless ocean. Every 10,000 years or so, a species emerges that refuses to bend. They look at power and laugh at it, face destruction, and do not flinch. Most of them are crushed. Their names are forgotten. Their worlds are ashes. She turned to look at Taeho with her ancient eyes. You are the first to succeed. In 60,000 years of council rule, humanity is the first species to say no and survive. Do you understand what that means? Taeho sat down beside her. I think I am beginning to. You have started something that cannot be stopped, Neith said. The species that were conquered are remembering who they were. The species that were afraid are learning to be brave. The old order is dying, and something new is being born, because of you, because of one word, no. Taeho was quiet for a long moment, watching the waves. We were terrified, he said finally. Every moment of it. We had no idea if we would survive. Just knew that we could not live with ourselves if we surrendered. Neith nodded slowly. That is what makes you different. Every other species calculated the odds and chose survival. You calculated the odds and chose defiance. It is the most illogical thing the Solari have ever observed. It is also the most beautiful. In Ethera Prime, the megastructure was being transformed. Where there had once been halls dedicated to submission and control, there were now memorials and museums. Dr. Hannah Yoon had spent the past year overseeing the construction of the Remembrance Hall, a massive space dedicated to every species that had been absorbed by the Council. Thousands of names covered the walls. Each one represented a culture that had been erased, a people that had been broken. Visitors from across the galaxy came to see it, to remember, to grieve for what had been lost. Hannah stood in the center of the hall, watching a group of young aliens read the names of their ancestors. They were Malvik, descendants of a proud species that had been conquered 3,000 years ago. Tears streamed down their faces. "I thought they would be angry," Hannah said to Ambassador Yuna, who stood beside her. "I thought they would hate us for what the council did." Yuna shook her head. "They are not angry at you. They're angry at themselves. For 3,000 years, they accepted their fate. They told themselves there was no choice. And then they watched a species half their age stand up and fight.
Oh.
It showed them what was possible. It showed them what they could have been." Small room near the docking bays of Nathera Prime, Commander Ginho Beak sat across from an unexpected guest. Warlord Goroth was smaller than before. His scales had healed, but his pride had not. He had been stripped of his rank, exiled from his people. He had nowhere left to go. "I want to understand," Goroth said. His voice was rough with exhaustion. "I want to know how you became what you are, how you learned to fight without fear." Jinho laughed softly. "Without fear? We were terrified every moment. I had nightmares for weeks before the battle. I still have them sometimes." Goroth frowned. "Then how did you fight at all?" Dinho stood up and walked to a small display case on the wall. Inside was a collection of old items, artifacts from Earth's history. Swords, medals, photographs of soldiers from wars, fought centuries ago, "We learned," he said, "by fighting ourselves. For thousands of years, humans made war on other humans. We killed each other over land and resources and ideas. It was terrible. Millions died. Civilizations fell. We nearly destroyed our own species." He turned to face Goroth. "But we also learned something. We learned that the spirit cannot be conquered. You can break a person's body. You can destroy their home, can take everything they have. But if they refuse to surrender inside their own mind, you have not truly won. That knowledge was bought with blood, Warlord. Centuries of it. It is the most expensive lesson in our history." Goroth was silent for a long time. "I would like to learn this lesson," he said finally. "I would like to become something other than what I was." Jinho smiled and offered his hand. "Then welcome to Earth. We have a lot of history to show you." 6 months later, the new Galactic Assembly held its first session. It was a smaller body than the old council, made up of species who had chosen to join freely. There were no demands, no threats, no quotas. Just beings who wanted to work together for mutual benefit. Ambassador Yuna Park addressed the assembly. She was older now, with gray in her hair and lines on her face. But her eyes were still sharp, and her voice was still strong. "We came to this galaxy as strangers," she said. "We knew nothing of your history, your cultures, your pain. All we knew was that we refused to be slaves. And when we made that choice, something miraculous happened. We found others who felt the same way. We found friends who had been waiting for someone to show them that resistance was possible." She paused, looking around at the faces before her, species from every corner of the galaxy. Ancient beings and young ones, former enemies sitting side by side. "What we have built here is fragile. It is new and uncertain, and full of problems we have not yet solved, but it is ours. We chose it. We fought for it, and no one will ever take it away." The chamber erupted in applause, a sound that echoed through the halls and out into the stars. Captain Minho Seo flew the Dawn back to Earth that evening. The ship was old now, scarred from its journey through history. But it still flew true, cutting through the darkness like a blade of light. As he entered Earth's atmosphere, a message arrived from Admiral Taiho, forwarded through the New Alliance network. "The Outer Rim colonies are requesting membership, as the Silari have offered to share their archives with human scholars. 3 more systems declared independence today. The universe is waking up, Captain. And it is asking what comes next." Minho smiled and looked down at the blue planet below. The planet that had started everything, the planet that had taught the galaxy how to say no. He opened a return channel. "What comes next? That is easy. We keep going. We keep building. We keep fighting for what matters. We never, ever kneel." He guided the dawn toward home, leaving a trail of fire across the evening sky. Behind him, a million stars burned in the darkness. Each one, a world waiting to discover what freedom truly meant. The universe was waking up, and humanity had lit the spark,